Oh, nothing. Those are both apple cider donuts. And then in the box, there's like these little like apple. They didn't have enough donuts, so they got other stuff.
My thoughts again now.
Is it safe?
Yeah. I mean, second one.
We could call it,
Yeah.
if you see Sean, just ask him if we are streaming.
The third one
Okay.
wasn't.
Vanessa
Okay.
did not have access. If I have anything in my mailboxes, can you bring it? I haven't checked. I'm not into like. Very mellow.
So we can call them in.
But now I'm not sure if I'm mixing that up with.
Just glancing.
The ultimate donut, I mean.
I have no answer to an email
Oh,
or text.
sorry.
I asked Vanessa to ask him when she got back from it. And can we tell from here? Natalie, can we tell from looking at the screen for streaming? Says live up in the upper right.
Yeah, that would be streaming. Yeah.
And then-
Yeah, we're on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I will call the meeting to order then at 6:04 PM. And please all rise to say the pledge.
like
The United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business is the approval of the minute of our meeting from August 18th, 2022. I think there might be one extension. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Do I have a second?
So
Right. Ed, all right, is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes from August 18th, 2022, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously at 6:05 PM. Okay, any public input?
There's no public input at this time.
The next order of business is personnel actions. Actions. To accept the resignations of Heather Nelson, part-time senior library clerk in the collection services department. Olivia Yule, part-time librarian, one in the programs and public services department. Huda Abakar, full-time library clerk in the access services department. And to approve the appointments of Kathy Zavarin from provisional to permanent part-time library clerk in the access services department. Andrew Petrakowski from full-time to part-time custodial worker. Ted Warner, part-time library clerk in the access services department. Effective September 14th, 2022, with a pay rate of $13.30. Do I have a motion to approve these personnel actions? Marcia? Second?
Second.
Joey. Okay, is there any discussion?
Captain. I only know this, so it's just on Mr. Warner's, it may be 1353, maybe a typo on that,
Oh, okay,
yeah, just for the record.
okay. So that was,
it says 1353.
Oh, it does, I thought you read 1333.
okay, so that was the correct.
Yeah, 1353 is the correct number, I thought you said 1333.
No, I probably was just not speaking clearly. All right, we have a motion to approve the personnel actions. All in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none. Unanimously at 6:08. Sorry. Okay. The next order of business is the treasurer's report for August 2022.
All right, good evening, everyone. And you should have the statements of net position, the first page of the financial report. And I'll talk just a little bit about a couple of the changes which were really expected and everything. So when you look at line 2, the short-term investments did go down about $400,000. And that's really expected because right now, you know, we're waiting for the tax levy to receive that. So we have to fund all of the expenses of the library as well as capital improvements and everything. So you would expect that to go down during the period that you're waiting for the tax levy. The prepaid expenses on line 4, we talked a little bit last month that it shot up, and you can see it compared to June and July went way up, and now it's gradually coming down. And we talked a little bit that, you know, we prepay our insurance expense, and then we ratably record that as expense over the year that it applies to. Accounts payable last month, it peaked up at about 253,000, and we knew that there was some expenses for a chiller replacement that were in there, and it's come down. It's still got a couple of items in there that are a little bit higher than usual. And we talked last month that the gray in areas are items that aren't going to change, with the exception of line 10. The accrued expenses changes ever so slightly every month, but those items, when the audit's complete, it'll be adjusted for June, and those changes will flow through. So they're items that we only change once a year. On page 2, the statements of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position, there's just a couple of things. I guess I'd start by saying that the month of August, and it should be, was very consistent with the month of July. So if you look down at line 27, the net income from operations, we had an excess of expenses over revenue of 246,000, and year to date it was 501,000. So it's almost, you know, identical results to July in terms of the overall, as it should be, absent any, you know, change. The one thing that was different was we did receive a grant of 10,136, which was a grant from, I'm hoping I get this right, the Upper Hudson Local Library Services Aid Division of Library Development. And I'm told that we get it once a year, and we typically don't budget for it. And someone said, you know, maybe we could. And we can at least consider that when we put the budget together. Sometimes I think that, you know, I'm superstitious, or at least a little stitious, and I'm afraid if you budget for it, it's not going to happen ever again. And there's no real basis in accounting for that, but that's just the conservative nature, I guess. Salaries and wages continue to be favorable. I guess I would just remind us that, you know, there will be retroactive increases once the union contract is ratified, and there's a new position in the works. So we would expect later on in the year that the favorable variance to that would diminish. I guess I should also say just the variance is always, if it's a positive number, it's a favorable variance. So the grants is a positive number, which means that the revenue is more than the budget. And with expenses, the salaries is a positive number. So because it's less than the budget. So brackets are always sort of bad, regardless of whether it's revenue or expense. The only other thing that I asked Tim too about was the equipment leases. There's actually, it's not really a lease. It's an expense for a new copier that was, I don't know, somewhere just over $3,000. And eventually we'll probably end up capitalizing that, but for now it's fine being there. But that leads to a little unfavorable variance in equipment leases. Technology, just as a reminder, we talked about that last month, and it's year to date, it's exactly $10,000 unfavorable. And there were some computers that were purchased that kind of skewed that up last month, and that'll carry over for a while. I think that's it on the revenue and expenses. We can go to the check register, or are there questions about the financial statements? Or questions that I can answer? Slight distinction. So the check register, Tim actually, I think he anticipated that I would ask questions about the large ones, so he actually put down explanations of the larger ones, basically. And I reviewed all the pile of checks wherever they are earlier today, and looked at the backup and everything, and thought that everything was appropriate. I don't know if there's questions on the check run. I wrote little notes on some of the items, just in case someone asked. Any questions or at all?
Trust your.
Actually,
Yeah,
that
finding
that
out.
either means I'm doing a really good job or a really bad job. So,
The notes are very helpful.
yeah, that's actually, I thought that was nice. That was a good anticipation, because I probably would have asked on all of those, so. All right, thank you very much.
Can I have a motion to approve the check register for September 2022? Second.
Second.
Vanessa. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the check register for September 22nd, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Aye. Does anyone opposed? Okay.
A little bit of a delay on the. It was frozen. I was like, wow, what a serious look.
Hearing no objections, passes unanimously at 6:15. Yeah. Okay. All right, next order of business is directors and department heads report. Audit 3.
Okay, thank you. The general areas I've been working on are the development of the cafe, the labor negotiations, the HR position. And I'll segue there for just a moment and say we have 2 interviews tomorrow, one on Monday. We had a canceled interview this previous Monday that we're working to reschedule. But we have 4 very good candidates. The transition to new library event software called Library Market. We did take a week of vacation first week in August, and Natalie and I have been having some kind of far-reaching discussions about trying to reorganize the library for efficiency in the future. Our passport service is on schedule to start October 3rd. What I do is I go through all the reports and come up with highlights from each department. I want to thank Tim Riley for his work on the DLD library construction grants, which we're getting close to finalizing, and also he hosted the annual audit during August. In the PR department, we were thrilled to be mentioned in the Christian Science Monitor about our Library of Things collection related to what we call cutting the cord and having things to watch at your home without subscribing to cable. Luann headed up a group of 3, including Lisa Pitkin and Natalie, to appear representing the library at National Night Out. So thank you for that. And Luann also took a photo of the sidewalk dedication ceremony that Kathy and I and many others were involved with, and sent it to the Times Union's Your Best Shot feature. So it ran, I believe, on Saturday or Sunday.
Sunday.
In the CERT department, it's very exciting. All the numbers are up, and the active library users for the month is up to 4,834. So that means people who've used their card in the month. And it's 80 short of the record for the last 5 years, which was August 2019. So if only 81 more people, all I'm looking for is 81 more certainly.
Tim?
Yes.
If I may,
Mhm.
in terms of the usage of that,
Mhm.
how has it changed over the last few years in terms of how precisely it's being used, what it's used for?
The recording of the statistics hasn't changed at all. The software hasn't changed. The pandemic and construction time, there was very serious drop-offs, which are actually summarized in Phil's report. But I think the 4,800 for August was as low as about 2,000 in some of the months related to the pandemic. I'm not looking at it right now. But actually, I will say a little later, I'll say it now. The kickoff of the summer reading program 2 months ago kind of exactly coincided and perhaps caused sort of a return to foot traffic and circulation and so forth. And then when the summer reading program ended in, I think, August 24th-ish, it didn't stop. So it continues to, people are coming back, which is good. Does that
What's the
answer?
breakdown in terms of books, tapes,
Okay.
DVDs, that kind of thing?
That's also in there, but there's a pie chart, but it's like a third adult books, a third children's books. The DVD collection is very interesting because when I came here 8.5 years ago, it accounted for nearly 50% of our circulation, and it's now inching down. I don't remember the number, but inching down to around 25 to 20%, reflecting people getting stuff through other, here we go. Yep. The AV, sorry, 24%. I guess I wasn't too far off. I thought it said 34, and I was like, oh. But, and another interesting statistic there is that the 3 self-checkout machines currently are accounting for 64% of the items checked out at the library. So I don't know how individuals make their decisions, but when I'm at the grocery store, for example, I go to a human if one is available without much waiting, and I go to the machine if I have a small order and can get out of there quicker by going to the machine. There is an added element in library services that sometimes people are looking for confidentiality about what they're checking out. It's probably not a whole lot of cases, but that may be driving some people toward the self-check. But it's a good feature in terms of efficiency. In terms of human interaction, you can draw your own conclusions on that, but it certainly the customers seem to like it. Other follow-ups on that? Okay. I want to thank 2 departing members of that department. Sudha Prabhakar, who we read about in the personnel actions, has left after 5 years. She was an extraordinary employee and taking another job at the state. And then I'm very sorry to announce that the head of circulation, Phil Berardi, is leaving the library for an assistant director position at the Bethlehem Public Library. And Phil is not only an excellent manager of people and his departmental assets, but he's the innovative force behind our 2 major innovations in the construction project, the RFID tracking system, where everything in the building has a unique identifier. For both of these, we're the first and still only library in Upper Hudson doing them. The other is the automated materials handling system that you see when you come in the front door. So we wish Phil well. He'll be our colleague in Bethlehem, where I'm thinking you will see those 2 innovations come to Bethlehem. But at any rate, sorry to be losing Phil. The summer reading program was very successful. And we've chosen over the last 2 or 3 years, it's typically a program for youth, but we've chosen to have an adult component to it, summer reading as well. So this year we had 160 adults sign up to participate, and they read a total of 1,800 books. And of course, we know that it's a small minority of people who sign up for this. So it's very nice for that much reading to be going on. The adult programming mostly for August was in a supporting role to the summer reading program for the youth, which is an extremely busy time. So we did have a hiccup, but it wasn't just us. We buy most of our books from a wholesaler named Baker and Taylor. And Baker and Taylor was hit by a ransomware attack. So basically every public library in the United States has about a 2.5 to 3 week gap in what they've acquired during August. That is over. And we have something like 46 book orders coming in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be a little busy in those departments. We did do a small amount of purchasing on Amazon and a small amount at the Book House of Stuyvesant Plaza just to keep some real hot titles moving. The IT department reports an increase in room setups for community events and also library programs. So that's starting to ramp back up. And the Helderberg room is now completely finished as of Tuesday. So that room is ready to roll for any purpose, with the exception that it's reserved for early voting and then the election from October 29th to November 8th. In the maintenance department, we had a personnel action there about Andrew Petrowski, going from full-time to part-time. He's now going to be leaving completely because he got a better job elsewhere. So we have another opening in maintenance that you'll soon see on our board out front. And we did just take down a very large dead tree in our staff parking lot right on the property line with Genetic Computer next door. Lastly, I conducted a favorable personnel evaluation for Tim Riley. Have not had a chance to discuss it with Tim yet, but it is completed and we will, I hope, discuss it tomorrow. And I'll be on vacation for 2 days, September 29th and 30th, a Thursday and Friday. And then one matter, I don't know if we would want to do it now or under either new or old business, but Scott Abraham, who runs the Guilderland Farmers Market, has asked to extend his contract, which was supposed to end on October 2nd and does end on October 2nd. And he would like to do 3 additional markets on Sunday, October 16th, 23rd, and 30th. The reason he's not asking to do Sunday, October 9th is because his contract was ending, we planned an event in the parking lot, which is basically an arts and crafts fall market. So we have that event on Sunday, October 9th. And then I brought copies of the contract, and at Kathy's direction, I double checked whether his insurance coverage extends beyond October 2nd. And it in fact was March to March. So March 2022 to March 2023. So we're insured, or he's insured, I think is a more accurate way to put it. So I don't know if you'd want to take that up now or later under either. It'd be old business in the sense that we already have a farmer's market, new business in the sense that we would like to change that. My basic outlook is it's generally a good thing for the community. I would like to recommend that be extended. So, but that is my report. Questions are welcome.
Tim, should we defer that to old business?
Old business, sure.
Just farmer's market. Farmer's market extension,
Yeah.
contract extension.
So, and I'm going to run to, the leash just discovered that between the two of us, we forgot to make copies of the cafe contract. So I'm going to grab copies of that for, I assume all of you need that. You printed it, so I'll make 10 instead of 11. Oh, you have it as well? So I should be back in like
I don't have, I mean, I need to get on my phone. So,
Oh, that'd be great. I'll email you the contract. Okay.
so eight-ish.
Is that the one you sent out? You,
It is the one I sent out, yeah. I don't have a printer by where I work in my house, so I always like don't print. I don't remember.
I work sometimes.
And, you know, never be shy about asking us to print. Obviously, like, if you ask 5 minutes before a board meeting, it's harder than if you ask 5 hours before. I'm not talking about you. I didn't think I didn't mean to be talking about it. But you didn't ask 5 minutes before the meeting, you asked during the meeting.
I asked 10 minutes into the meeting.
Oh, let's see.
Fair enough.
Leash on librarian committee reports, is there something besides the cafe contract to be discussed?
Yeah.
Under the building and grounds, or would you like to defer that until?
No, I can start talking about, the furniture. And then in addition to that, although I think it should be talked about probably in a different section, is we touched on it last meeting, but maybe getting that $10,000 threshold that you used to be able to approve with Tim on office expenditures. But we did talk about, there were 3 areas where they were looking at, library furnishings is under the circulation desk. There was shelving, because right now there's, kind of stuff on the floor and things like that. There's already a shelf there, so it was getting additional shelves to match that one. Retrofitting Jenna's office space to match similar offices, correct? Right? And then there was like a cart for where
those
they have the
chairs.
stack of these chairs over here, so they can be moved around for programming and just whenever needed. And so the amount for that was around $6,500. Have you ever put in my notes? It was 8,000. Okay.
I can pull up the exact one.
No, it's right here. Yeah, so I do math. That's why.
Yeah,
Just the
it's
financial
like
guy.
8,500.
It's just shy of 9, yeah. So, and that included workstation, additional storage cabinet, a chair for Natalie's office to match everyone else's office chair, bookcase for Phil under circulation desk storage and installation, and then the storage carts for the chairs.
Just as a minor matter, I did check with Phil about his bookcase request after I knew that he'd accepted a job elsewhere. And he thinks that,
Can't take it with him.
thinks that the next occupant of the office would enjoy a bookcase, but I am going to check some existing bookcases we have to see if we fit. So if they fit. So I would subtract the bookcase if I could.
Do we know how much of that amount is the bookcase?
Guessing it's like 700 or 800 compared to the rest. Oh, okay. 413.82. But still, if we have one that fits there, I would rather use one we have than.
Right.
Yeah.
So in our discussions of it, and Vanessa brought up a good point, is we would want to probably match what we already have here since we already brought in this nice equipment. So we had talked about from here on out, looking at more budget-friendly options for some furnishings that are needed, but in order to match what we currently have, we at the committee level were recommending to go with the proposed expenditures unanimously. So I don't know if there's any questions.
Can I just add to that? I think since we collapsed the function of the design committee into buildings and grounds, the committee was unclear if the committee had the same ability designated to it as the design committee previously had, which is why we're bringing a recommendation to the board versus us just approving it in committee. So
Yeah,
we would have liked to have approved it, but to err on the side, caution, we
Yeah.
are recommending it. We'd like the board to vote on that and to restore our ability to make these final decisions as the construction project is.
I think the board voted to give $5,000 of authority.
was that what was done last meeting?
Last
I know we discussed it last
Last
meeting,
meeting.
but I don't remember if there was a
Wasn't at that
threshold.
so I don't know. Sorry.
Last
month, we voted for the Buildings and Grounds Committee to have authority up to 5,000.
5,000, okay.
So we needed to bring it in.
And
So
then
there you go.
there should be very few additions after this point, although there are some construction related things in the cafe that the board will need to decide about.
All right, well, there you have it.
All right, so this was over 5,000, so we'll have to vote on it.
So this is up to $8,000 for the purchase of the furniture that was in the invoices that were emailed.
I think it was closer to 85, but yeah, it's broken down in the invoices that were attached. And this was what was recommended by Megan. She did the research on items to match what we have.
So it's $8,500.
I can do the exact
You can make the
calculation if
exact
you
amount.
want to know, but it's
Just
more
vote
than
on up to
8,000.
9. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we can do up to 9.
Yeah, we went around. Yeah, did anyone have any questions on? It's 8,800. 8,800, or, so I would put 9. Yeah, just put 9, that's 8,800.
So that's what the board has previously done at times when there's a budget to do something. then spend.
Right.
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve a $9,000, up to $9,000 budget for the purchase of furniture as in the invoices provided?
And that's coming out of that budget that we've been using for building, so it's not coming out of our,
This is the construction.
just so people know. I don't know, he's making a fake, maybe don't, okay,
No, I-
call me. We eventually have to pay it back,
Yeah.
just that caveat. I make a motion.
Sorry, I wasn't supposed to have that facial reaction. I did though.
No, I'm glad you did that.
Okay, motion by Rich, is there a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay. So the motion is to approve up to $9,000 for purchase of
No.
furniture. So the budget for purchase of, say, office furniture?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to approve the $9,000 amount, please signify by raising your hand, saying aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? Hearing no one opposed, the motion passes as 34. Okay.
And then, yeah, and we have the contract in front of us. I could go section by section. And just kind of review. I know we had discussed it at the last meeting, so I'll just kind of focus on like what the changes were, but if you have any questions on the additional section, just let me know. We did the, highlighting's gone, so I'm trying to remember the sections off the top of my head. So, in 2B, we did make a change there, and there is a proposed change by Chris Lanchanton, so we can decide if it's worth making the change or not. But just saying that the vendor may be provided, so it went from less concrete to like an opportunity, right? We changed it from right of first refusal to an opportunity to provide food and beverage catering for any program or event. And we set a threshold in there of $150 or more. It used to be nothing, and so everything would have to go through them. So this kind of gives a little more autonomy to the staff for smaller staff meetings and things like that. And then it says within 10 days of receipt, and Chris had proposed that that be a sort of a time frame that waivers depending on the needs, because someone might need something sooner than the 10 days, or it might be far enough out. So that will be, there's a proposal after we made the recommendation from the committee when we had our meeting to just changing that to a variable amount of days based on whoever's filling in the request. So any questions on that? It seemed copacetic between both the vendor and the staff when we discussed.
How's that gonna, but do we have proposed language for that? How that's gonna read in the contract?
Yep, yeah, she sent it in the email thread. I don't know if, I can pull it up and read it word for word, but hold on one sec. If Google will cooperate and show me what I see, hold on. Okay, so the proposal is tenant may be provided the opportunity to provide food and beverages for library programs or events that are anticipated to cost the library $150 or more. Upon receipt of the notice, the tenant must respond in the affirmative that it desires to provide the goods and services requested within the time period reflected in the notice. Any failure to respond within the time set forth will be deemed a refusal and will allow the library to contract elsewhere for such goods and services. If notice is received in a timely manner, the library will notify the tenant of its decision to agree to the provision of such goods and services. So that's
We control the response time depending
Yeah.
on the particular.
or whoever's requesting it. So if it's like a community group coming in and they decide to go with them with catering, they can say like, we're gonna be there next week. So that might be less than 10 days. So they'll just say, we need to know the next 3 days. And we did have a call with the department heads today and Melanie, and everyone seemed good with that. So no pushback there. And then the next section with change was the hours of operation. The start time Monday through Friday was a question mark. We settled with 8:30 being okay. The lawyer assured us that our insurance would cover any kind of like out there situations that might occur during that time. So,
I think our insurance and their.
and there's, yeah, between the two, there's full coverage, so there's no liability that will come out of that. The beginning and start date will, of course, depend on when we do agree to this, and then it'll be a year date from now. Any questions on those two little sections? Pretty straightforward.
Is the 1 year at the request of the library or the request of the vendor?
I don't know.
The length of the contract?
Yeah.
We decided that.
I don't honestly know, but I think in today's meeting, we talked about, and I think we've talked about in in-person meetings in the past, having a contract for a relatively short period of time so that if either party had real problems with what they were held to in the contract, we could revisit, you know. So that's the thinking behind it. And then this particular vendor has expressed an interest in being here long-term if it's a successful venture. So I think that the next contract would probably be for 3 or 5 years based on previous discussions. So I don't know if you happen to have talked about that with Mel, but that's my recollection.
No, I know she did say that she plans to be here a while, but I think it's good to have some variability in the contract. If we figure out we got something wrong in the first year, and then if everything's good, then they're, you know, we make the appropriate changes or leave it as is for a longer period of time than a year. Next.
I've never read it. I mean, I've not read this contract, or at least I haven't absorbed it. I suspect it's somewhere in here. It defines the hours of operation, but not the days, holidays, that kind of thing. Is that somewhere in this?
I imagine they just follow the library holidays, right?
We could ask, you know.
Yeah, I had a question about that also. Are these, are they, you know, I wasn't sure how to understand these hours of operations. Like, are they saying they're basically promising that they're going to be open during those hours? And are they precluded from operating outside of those hours? So I just, you know, once they're up and running, if they find, like, for example, you know, they're saying Sunday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., the library doesn't open until 1 o'clock on Sundays. They might find out that they have no one showing up Sunday mornings. It's not a busy time for a cafe at a closed building. Are they obligated to be open in those hours even if no one's showing up, or can they change their, you know, their hours? And alternate, on the other hand, if they find out that they're getting a lot of late afternoon traffic and the library is open until 9, but they're closing at 4, and they wanted to extend later, you know, would they have to have an amendment to the contract, or would they be able to, you know, open until 4:30 or 5 or whatever? I'm not clear what, you know, it's in the contract, but I'm not clear, is this locking them into having to operate those hours and only those hours?
I mean, really, it's they're just occupying this space, and I guess they would have their own agency over that, right? I mean,
It was my understanding, I think you bring up a really good point about the ending times, but it was my understanding that these hours were the ones within like the boundaries of what they could choose. I never saw it as like you are obligated to be open, but you can't operate outside of these. Especially on because of the other staff being around or something, like the maintenance.
I wasn't here other than the part of the discussion I was part of was just the opening, but I don't know, like, was there anything definite when you initially started this contract?
Nothing definite, but to go to the kind of the impact of your question, Mike, the intent on the part of the cafe operator is to, we may need to clarify this in the contract, but the intent is to be sort of flexible and responsive to consumer demand. So using your example of if they're, you know, having rushes of sales, you know, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I think they're going to want to continue rather than like blocking the door and saying thanks, but, you know, so maybe it needs to be rewritten in a sense to say, these are, like Vanessa's idea is one good way to do it, although frankly, I'd love it if they wanted to be open at 7 PM. Like I think of the high school students studying, that sort of thing. So,
Do the hours of operation need to be in the lease?
It's kind of what I was wondering. I think, we're gonna have this cafe. I'd like them to be successful and I think they'll learn as they go when they're actually getting, customers and when it makes sense to be open. I think, unless we feel very strongly that we need them to be open certain time, we want them to be open for, breakfast every day, regardless of whether they're always getting business or something like that. If we feel strongly on that, but otherwise I would just leave it to their discretion to be open whenever they think it makes sense financially, just to have the best
Yeah.
possibility that they're actually going to be successful and be able to stay
Well,
on
if they're
that
catering
space.
programs, they're gonna be outside of these hours anyway, because
Yeah.
Take it out.
And maybe if it is, if it's important to someone, it perhaps should just be like any hours that they would be restricted from operating. Like, if
Okay.
you won't let them come in until 6 AM, or they have to be out of the building by 10, maybe that would be.
It would be hard because depending on the program.
I don't think flexibility, I agree with flexibility, but I don't think it should be that flexible because I think the public has a right to know the hours of operation. So I wouldn't
Sure.
leave it to their discretion to say when it's financially viable for them to come in. I think that's a little too loose.
Well, what if we replace it with they will inform the library in advance of their hours of operations so that those can be posted or displayed or made available to the public? So they're not changing it on a day-to-day basis and surprising people that it's not open when they thought it is. But I just don't like the idea of locking them into certain hours if it turns out, yeah.
But I think we need to have some boundaries because if they decide to open at 8 and close at 10, and the public has a different idea as to what the hours are, I think that's going to cause a lot of problems for the public.
So I like that language because I think as if we have notice, then we can obviously go back and forth that there's like an issue with the time. Because you're right, if you put times in here, that's not necessarily even gonna be true because if they're doing program catering, they're gonna be doing all different times. And we can't even say like you can't go past 10 because what if it's a nighttime event goes to 11, so then I think we just leave that, we change the hours of operation to just tenant will inform library of intended operating hours for posting
Yeah, I mean,
notices and whatever.
You're right, the library on Sunday doesn't open until 1,
Yeah.
so why should they be here at 9?
And she's texting me as we're talking. She said that she'll adhere to the holiday hours of the library.
So
Just keep it easy.
So there'll be some linkage between the library's holidays and the cafe.
She said she'll follow the library holidays, so it's just uniform across the board. I don't think we have a ton of holidays that we take, so just the biggies, right? So. So yeah, so then for this time section, we'll remove it and just say we'll inform the library of hours. And then holiday hours and the library holiday days. Okay, cool. So section 4, rent utilities. We are running into an issue where we can't be seen to be making a profit. And really what we were charging for rent was meant to cover utilities. So we clarified the language to say no rent will be charged, but tenant will pay a monthly amount of $200 for the tenant's use of the leased premises to cover the cost of utilities. So we made a best guesstimate based on how much our utilities cost and then the square footage, and it was roughly around $200. Obviously, that will be variable in about a year if we figure out that we didn't estimate that correctly. But I think that'll probably be good right there since it's a small space relative to the building. Any questions on that one? Nope. All right. The next section was the real estate taxes and municipal assessments. That was something that we had to do some research on, Tim and Vanessa, and we consulted everybody under the sun. It really seemed to be at the end of the day that it was mostly a non-issue. And then if any taxes did come up, the tenant would be responsible for any taxes and assessments based on like their portion of the premises. So it would not be like the entire building, which is how it was kind of weird worded before. It was like all of the library property. So it made it sound like it'd be a little out of hand. But we got confirmation that it'll just be sort of on that square footage in that area. Any questions on that one? Let's see. The next is number 9. We did chat about services and maintenance. So not much on this changed, other than it said in here that the landlord would provide access to telephone and internet, which was not true. So we fixed that. So we changed it to landlord shall not provide access. And that the tenant was responsible for the care and cleaning of the cafe. So that was pretty much the only change. We just clarified that we would not be providing telephone and internet services. So that's on them to do, which was fine. That was something Mel was aware of. It was just a typo. And then for the furnishings and fixtures,
Sorry, just,
go
forgive
ahead.
me, I'm sure that I've missed it somewhere here. It's things like trash and all, is that in here as well?
So it's all gonna be under what the library has. We don't expect it to increase the service needs for trash.
So they don't need an extra bin or anything like that?
I don't think so, Tim. You said that was not.
And so that's a good example of if they're wildly successful and we would need to increase our frequency of garbage pickup, which is currently twice a week. Then that's a reason, in my opinion, to have a shorter term contract so that we can recover from that, you know.
There's no issue about the nature of the garbage, right?
No.
Okay.
No, they use all eco-friendly stuff, like
Yeah,
that
but I
in
mean,
their
if we
cafe
we
too,
do
so.
paper, then they're gonna have food, you know, stuff like that, just to make sure that our garbage collection people are not gonna understand it's different,
No,
so.
I don't think that.
I don't either,
And then furnishings and fixtures, the language in there only made mention of the counter, but we wanted to sort of make that a little broader, just saying anything that the library supplies, because we're putting in bookshelves and things like that too, just to make it clear that that will remain property of the library. And then they are responsible for any interior furnishings like tables, chairs and stuff like that. So we just clarified the language there as well. And then 11B, we clarified because it just kind of said that any damage done will be repaired. But basically, we added in to return the lease space to the original state, since it's kind of hard to judge like what would damage be. And then I recommended, which it's not in the contract, that we do like a typical, like a walkthrough like you would in an apartment. And then that way, just to cover on both sides, like no, any damages, little marks, take pictures, and then just have that on file, so. Any questions on that?
Any consideration to a security deposit? That kind of way.
No, because they're not paying rent. So I don't know how that would work if you take a security, financially, what would that, waiting for the face? I don't know how you would track that, like how would that mess up anything? But
Holding that money for,
We could,
I mean, it's in the contract for them to like repair things back to the original state, so I don't know. Let him marinate on it. He's thinking over there, so.
So this utilities is $200 a month.
Yeah, that's what we kind of figured out rough, just like as a round number on that amount of space in relation to how much is paid in utilities. Since Tim rightly said, you know, they're already technically heating and cooling and providing water and stuff to that space. So it's only like minimally increasing it, plus they're covering their own telephone and internet, so. It wasn't a huge expenditure expected, but we didn't let them know, you know, if it turns out being different, then that might adjust, and then next time we re-up the contract. So basically, they'll just be covering utilities. Since we can't be making profit as a profit.
Was that like prorated? Is that how you arrived at the number in terms of square footage?
You said
Yeah.
somebody ran some just like rough numbers,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, we took the square footage of the library is 36,000 square feet and the square footage of the space is 750 square feet. And just kind of did a back of the envelope calculation.
So yeah, I don't know. That's a good point on the security deposit, but I don't know how that would work technically.
I personally think as long as they are held in the contract to repairing any damage.
Then we're covered. Yeah, so then if there's any major damage, I assume that you can make an insurance claim, right? Or they would make the claim. Did you say no?
I don't know.
Oh.
I mean, if insurance covers, accidents, not defamation.
Well, if they set it on fire on purpose.
Or,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just thinking that, yeah, they're obligated contractually, but then you have to take them to court if they don't do it. Yet if you have the security deposit, you could use that money to make repairs, should they. And everyone goes in good faith, but contracts are broken every day, so you just have a security deposit of $1,000 or something, then something does happen. We could hold that money and, in a separate bank account, give it back to them when they leave, if you don't have no damage, or you, just like any landlord would, But it's just something to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. To wait and see what you come up with.
I'm a finance person. We don't trust anybody.
I know.
But I said at some point, you just have to say,
It's a risk.
but you can't, yeah.
You have to recognize it's a risk.
But then again, it's like, how much can you get in a security? It's either gonna be really bad or, or it'll be fine. And I
Or we
guess,
take the hit,
and you can't cover really bad probably. So I don't know if that's worth the squeeze, but.
Yeah,
They take full responsibility for the cost of repair. I'm assuming that this would also include a situation where there was a real hazard.
Mhm.
And we took responsibility for paying for it, but got reimbursed. In other words, problem would be for any kind of liability. It wasn't fixed immediately, because we would put perhaps patrons and people who were in danger, of talking about something extensive. Smoke damage is a good example, leaked into the library. Or somebody, there was a fire or somebody fell. So, if I were drafting this, I would say we could fix it, that they would reimburse us, but since it says they take full responsibility for the cost of repair, I'm comfortable with that.
okay. All right, so we're good. Anybody? All right. Let's see. Section 14, the sale of books. Originally, it said that we would profit 50-50 split. And then, I forget who brought it up, but it was a really good question. If they're donated books, it seemed odd for a for-profit company to benefit from a donated item. So 100% is going to the library now. Vendor's cool with it. So that was changed in that section from 50-50 to library will get the full revenue of that. Any questions on that? Alrighty. The tenant access, this was feedback we got from the last meeting and we just added it in here. It was the wording was weird and it made it sound like the tenant couldn't go into the rest of the library like ever. I don't know. It was worded really weird. And so we just clarified it to say that they couldn't go when the library is closed unless there was prior permission granted by the library director. And so I just added that caveat in there because there might be times like the catering or something like that where they're helping out with the program after hours so that they're allowed to leave the cafe and bring the food over.
Sorry.
It was very restricting. So, yeah, so we clarified that. Any questions on that? Okay. And honestly, I think, okay, so look, and it says there's number 19. All promises made by the parties in this lease, the lease can be changed only by an agreement in writing signed by and delivered to each party. So this isn't set in stone. This looks like it can be changed even within the year if there's something like drastically needing to be changed. So just a neat little loophole in there just in case. And that was it, really. The rest of it's like boilerplate, technical legalese that we just assumed was pretty good and Chris signed off on. So do we have any other worries, concerns?
There's one question.
Sure.
And this is really obscure, but let's say that COVID came back with a vengeance and the library had a policy. Does the cafe have a policy that's consistent with it? Is there,
Theirs might even be stricter as they
it might be, but
doing
I mean,
food, so
does
they
there
might
need
be
to any
subject.
provision in terms of,
They probably have to follow whatever Department of Health, like,
Or it could
which
be the
we might
closure.
not follow, right? So we might not follow it as strictly, but they're probably gonna be held to more strict. So I don't know if you wanna pair it with ours, because we might have totally different things since we're not handling food here, the library.
We have a law and reg section, so
Yeah,
I'm sorry, which one is?
Yeah, it's paragraph 6. I think it looks true.
look at 6, yeah.
CDC, not Department of Health, there we go.
Got it.
CDC, she says they always follow CDC and Health Department laws and regulations.
So is this addendum for the
Yes.
insurance, that this is addendum to this contract?
Yeah, so this spelled out more what was originally in here. It just gave like the general liability, but this actually broke it down more in depth. This came from, what's the name of the auditing or insurance?
Chris Broussard at 10.
And there we go. You know everyone's name off the top of your head. I do
Not
not.
to have them sell liquor.
No, she doesn't have a liquor license, so.
We don't need to have, yeah.
No,
Okay.
no, I
Although
think we get them for programs, but it's like a one.
you have caller ID at home and we call you from here. The caller ID says Guilderland Pub. Would like eventually to put the pub in the public library, but not at this time.
There you go. Yeah, so, and she said that they get notices sent to them by the health department, so that they have to follow, so just to clarify that, as I'm getting text.
Are they gonna be rated like a restaurant? You know,
Yeah.
like A for
Yeah.
excellent, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll have a Michelin.
But yeah, so this just spelled it out more in depth, because this was like, Chris said it was very lengthy to add into a contract, plus it might always change, so we just added it on as like a addendum.
You guys did a really good job.
Thanks.
Just out of curiosity,
A
do
lot
we
of
know,
conversation.
do we know what they serve, what they're planning to serve?
Yeah, so she did come at the beginning of one of our meetings to do like a quick meet and greet, but I know they're gonna be very like breakfast and lunch heavy. And then there is gonna be some rotating items, but the bulk of it's gonna be like fresh breakfast sandwiches, coffees, lattes, that kind of thing. Breakfast empanadas, lunch is gonna be like salads, rice bowls, sandwiches, that kind of stuff. So it's like kind of your standard fare with like kind of different ethnic cuisine thrown in there. So she's Puerto Rican and her partner is Filipino, so they tend to add a lot of that stuff into their food. And then they're all, she said menus on the website, but they're also like trained chefs, so they have like a wider, repertoire as needed for like the catering. So she's done Italian, different Asian cuisine, all that different stuff. So, yeah. So I'm hoping for some Filipino food since you're listening. I do like the rice bowls and the lumpia, that's my jam. So it'll be like a nice variety. I think it'll be unique to the area, especially with Crowing Hen closing too. Crowing Hen, what's it called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they moved their emphasis to Voorheesville. Yeah.
So we'll have a lot of opportunity for offering something neat here. So that'll be really cool.
No.
Yeah. Anything? So basically, we would like to approve this contract with the addition of just taking out the hours of operation, just saying we'll inform the library, right? Or the vendor will inform the library for them to post, specifying holiday hours equal library hours. And I think that's the only change. Can we approve it with that?
Well, there's also the change from Chris about,
Oh, right, yeah. I have to go back to my email. Okay. So, right, and switching out that 10-day with basically whatever specified, and then any failure to respond is a waive of acceptance. Are we okay to approve with those two changes? Yes, we're okay.
I move that we approve the lease with the two changes noted.
Motion by Corey, second.
I'll second it.
Motion by.
Second in a row.
All right.
Been on a lot of phone calls this week.
I know.
That was a lot of work for that committee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She came on her birthday on a phone call, so.
Wow.
You did the heavy lifting. Like truly, I just want to say good job.
Thank
This
you.
was really well done.
Is
Really
today
great
Mel's
job.
birthday?
No,
Oh.
Vanessa's birthday was
Oh,
on that,
Vanessa.
on the ad hoc call I was just like, oh, people pick it up. So appreciate it. Enjoy your birthday donuts and apple turnover.
All in favor?
Yes.
Uh,
All right.
Anyone opposed?
Congrats,
Hearing-
Mel. I know you're not actually on my phone. Congrats.
7:03.
7:03
When
PM.
can we expect the cafe to open?
Oh, yeah, ASAP. Let's see if she texts me. Mel, when are you opening?
You're gonna get a lot of traffic. People, they don't even walk into the library.
Thanks again to the committee.
I have a 10-year-old roommate who doesn't pay rent and is very excited for this.
I'm
Always
excited
asks
too.
about this library since the construction was done.
Wow.
The cafe opens.
We're trying to figure out the swings, how she can replicate her swings. That's her that's her brand, is having the swings in her cafes. So she says, thank you all in caps. She didn't get the link to the meeting though, because I had to have her join.
Oh, I sent it twice.
I don't know.
Okay.
Technology.
You know, she has the two different emails, and the second time I only sent it to the catering emails.
Yeah, so now that this is approved, we can just get all the build stuff going and get them in there. So, yeah, she says hoping for by January at the latest, but before that. I know she'd like before that for sure. Portable swings are on the list, she said. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Planning a grand opening.
We are.
Not a time. It's not a grand opening discussion.
You guys are on a roll.
Let me
Just
have my
made the
win for
other-
like 1 minute.
The other
1
1
minute.
minute, that was a whole lot.
Great. I don't think Barbara is here.
Here.
There she is. I didn't see you there, Barbara. All right, so is there any long-range planning?
Just a quick report. We met on the 25th of August. And as we had discussed, with the board, the original idea was to develop a mission statement, which we have done and, may expand upon a little bit. And from that mission statement, then you develop basically a PR theme. And then you have to use that theme to integrate and get input from various segments of the community, the staff, the board itself. And we were really sort of being led in the process by Andrew Genovese, who has done this in the industrial scene and in the academic scene. And the old way of doing long-range planning has sort of fallen by the wayside in these venues, so that we come up with more of a strategic plan. But after our meeting where we had discussed a number of these options, a subcommittee was going to meet to see how we could particularly draw in the staff input. And at that meeting, apparently, the subcommittee decided that they would go with sort of the traditional long-range planning as sort of, we all have copies of our original long-range plan. And so Natalie suggested that perhaps we look at long-range plans from other libraries that have followed that particular strategy, and perhaps get some input from Tim Burke from Upper Hudson. So as it stands right now, I guess we're looking for some direction from Natalie and Tim Burke as to whether the entire board needs to be trained in their methodology or just the committee itself. Any comments from those that were at the meeting or whatever that I've left something out?
That was my recollection of that. I went off to speak with Upper Hudson to get a focus group to collect information and input from the staff, and that's been scheduled for September 29th. I suggested that the board or the committee do long-range planning, but I have not had the go-ahead from the board to do so to schedule it with timber.
Not so much long-range planning, but like an Upper Hudson session on long-range planning, as opposed to them leading it, right? So.
Right, I think we have that under new business. Okay, was that it, Barbara?
And the only other sad loss is that having gone away from the strategic plan type of planning, Andrew Genovese has sort of backed off because that's his area of expertise, not the old-fashioned long-range planning type methodology. So I really want to publicly thank him for all the input that he gave us and all the direction and all his enthusiasm. And as I said, we'll keep him informed as to what we're doing, but we have sort of lost his leadership role on guiding us through this process. So thanks, Andrew.
I just want to make a quick comment about the subcommittee because I was in that committee meeting and that is not exactly what happened. And I had clarified this in an email. The committee had discussed our options moving forward in meeting with the staff. And it was after that committee meeting that Natalie had made the recommendation in consultation with others that perhaps the subcommittee not meet with the staff, but we have Upper Hudson come in. There was no decision in that subcommittee loose meeting that anything else take place or there be any changes to long-range plan versus a strategic plan. The long-range plan is what is actually required by the state, so we have to continue to use that terminology. Strategic planning is very similar, but it is a different structure. I am in no way suggesting that we change forward thinking for the library. I want to make that very clear. What I am suggesting is that we follow what the state requires.
And I think the reason they had decided that it was not good to have board members meeting with the staff was potentially that it would change the answers given, where there would be some sort of perceived, like, I don't know. I don't know. My brain's not working today, but that's what I remember. I just was so stuck on cafe stuff lately that I totally forgot that happened like a month ago. So yeah, so I think that's where that came from. I wasn't in that one. I think there was an email that floated around that had my name as being part of that subcommittee and I wasn't. I had to drop off, but that was my understanding that, you know, a lot of times what happens in committees is we say something, then someone does additional research and then, you know, the best practice that we want to go forward with sometimes changes. And I think that was just a suggestion that we don't go and potentially affect and have like an objective party come in. That's how I remembered it. I might be forgetting some of it, but yeah, I'm sorry, Andy, felt like we were, you know, not giving him credibility in the strategic planning area, but I didn't remember us suggesting or wanting to change what we were doing. So I got stuck on semantics, but yeah.
I can give a
Sorry,
very
Bob.
quick, concrete example of why the board and also the administration should not be involved. So the session that Upper Hudson plans to conduct is very library operations focused. It's very much about programs, services, hours of operation, things like that. And so, for example, if I were in the room with the staff of the Guilderland Library, I was the person who came up with the idea of circulating folding tables to the community. It's very popular with the community, but it's not very popular with the staff. So do you think the staff are going to say, well, one of the questions in the survey is what one service would you sunset? And, you know, we want an honest answer to that. In terms of collecting input from the staff to the process about more holistic, quality of life, philosophical kinds of things, that's not the point of this session that Upper Hudson is conducting, and there may be a way to have such input. I haven't looked into it, but this one is just, you know, about how the library operates. And so Tim and Mary from Upper Hudson are held in high regard by the staff. And, you know, they know that it's basically kind of a cone of silence, you know, that they'll report the results, but they won't report. They'll have a free flowing discussion as opposed to an inhibited discussion. So
I have Here's a comment and a question. I was not pleased with the way this unfolded. I made that rather abundantly clear. I think on a procedural basis, I was particularly miffed because it was my thought that when we concluded the subcommittee, there was a consensus, or at least there was no opposition expressed that I recall, and maybe I missed it, but I heard no opposition expressed to the idea of direct contact with staff. The next thing I knew, I felt as though I was presented with a kind of fait accompli in a very different direction. And I felt that in terms of procedural integrity, we talk a lot about best practices. The best practices that I'm familiar with would prohibit that kind of conclusionary result absent the dynamics of a committee deliberation to which we and I were not privy. So on a procedural basis, I found it objectionable. On a substantive basis, I found it somewhat problematic as well. From what Tim says, the considerations, it's not, a focus group to me goes in a very different direction from what Tim's describing in terms of the objectives or goals of this meeting. It seems to be very kind of micro-based. It seems to be very procedural, very administrative, not vision-related at all. If that's the case, it doesn't really coincide with what I take to be the mandate of long-range planning. So I'm not sure that it actually addresses what it is that we were undertaking in that committee, because it feels very small caliber compared to what I imagined we were talking about, which was more aspirational. So on both of those grounds, I had some issues.
So just out of curiosity, so in this case, like we made what we thought was our best guess at what the right course of action would be in the committee level. And then additional research was done after, and an email was sent saying, hey, maybe we should do it this way. And then it was thrown around that we should re-meet. Would that not have been an acceptable solution that we just rediscuss with this new information? It just seemed like it kind of fell apart before we could even get to an additional meeting.
There wasn't much of a maybe in at least what I read. I mean, to me, it was determined kind of a priority that, you know, it wouldn't work what we all decided in the committee. It just wouldn't work, and it was now off the table, and the way to pursue it under best practices was this way. Whenever you invoke best practices, you've lost, because, you know, no one's going to say, I'm opposed to best practices. You know, I mean, in terms of best practices, the procedure was not followed in my view. I've said that, and I apologize for repeating. But, you know, the underlying reason or rationale for going this alternative route, about which we were not consulted, but which we were presented with, suggested some kind of inhibition on the part of staff to express themselves freely. That seemed to be sort of the underlying rationale, which was an argument that never arose in our committee meeting, wasn't presented. I was kind of blindsided by that. I've spoken with a number of staffers on multiple occasions and never found them to be inhibited at all. I found it to be quite candid on a variety of issues. And so I just sort of felt disenfranchised, and the opportunity to follow it up again seemed to be foreclosed. First, we had a resignation from the committee, and then there was support for this alternative decision by, I think, 3 of the 4 surviving members. So it didn't seem like much of an invitation to me to pursue it. I mean, my goal in here is not to be an impediment, but if the concrete had already started to harden, I really didn't want to waste people's time or my own even. So, you know, I raise this not because I'm in a state of perpetual resistance, but because, you know, I'm in a state at the moment of resignation, and not resigning from the committee or the board, but kind of emotional resignation that, you know, I can count and I accept what the numbers are.
And I understand that, Ted, and I'll take some responsibility for that, because I was also in agreement when the second proposal came in with it, because it was logically made sense to me, but I do understand the procedure, which is why I did recommend that we get together and talk about it again before we move forward as the Long Range Planning Committee, and that never got moved forward, so we're at a standstill. I am not deep in the concrete on one side or the other. I do have leanings, but I want to talk it out with everybody.
Well, let me just ask one substantive question, because I'm new to all of this and I don't know the culture of the board or the committees. But I'm a little confused because, and again, I don't know the nomenclature that you all are experts at, but long-range planning to me feels much more blue sky than what we're talking about now in a focus group. Or maybe I'm missing that, and maybe that's not the case.
And I think that's the benefit of having the UHLS people come in and talk to us about long-range planning and how we can set it up, is that we get a better idea of how it should be structured.
So I'm not on the committee, but if I could just comment, I think that you guys can still have a follow-up meeting. I mean, just need another committee meeting. Nothing's been decided that would prevent you all from continuing to explore. But just from hearing this conversation, I'd recommend at a minimum, the committee understands the requirement by the state, and then blue sky way. I love blue sky. Like, that is actually my personal interpretation of those words, but the state of New York for libraries might actually mean something different. And so I think it would be important to understand the distinction there. The state won't say you can't do more, but at a minimum, we have to make sure that you won't meet the obligation and produce the required document. And so that's all I
I
want
like
to
that.
offer.
I just want to, I guess what I was unclear on is it did feel as though this focus group was preemptive of those broader efforts.
Yeah, and I don't know
That's what
because I
got.
wasn't there. I'm just suggesting that it sounds like you all will be meeting again this month to
It sounds like you
discuss.
need to put together a plan so that you can discuss planning.
A long-range plan for the long-range plan.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I think you need a plan
The
for.
product is a long-term plan. It doesn't mean you don't have to plan to
Yeah.
produce it. I
Yeah,
agree
so,
with that.
so that you have a blueprint as to what you perceive you're doing and a timetable to do it. I mean, my understanding, and I'm not on this committee, but this is not something that's going to come up to the board next meeting. This is long-range planning. And so you have to fashion what it is that is required by the state, and you need to set the agenda and a timetable.
I
And
think
then
that's a good level
periodically
set.
report to us, but
That
this
out
is not,
first.
you know, this is not like furniture, yes, no.
Yeah.
It's,
The last thing I'm going to say on this is that, you know, my experience in these realms of planning, especially the long range stuff, is that the best ideas are not top down. They're all about buy-in, they're grassroots, they're the people that are directly affected, and that intermediaries do not advance that consideration. We don't even know the questions to ask until we have the discussions, if we're really truly open-minded and want to know what's on the minds of people that work at this library and what their needs are. I have no agenda. I come to this, you know, really a blank slate. But I'm dying to know what's on their minds. And so what was troubling to me is that the structure, and I've been party to and complicit in a number of focus groups over the years, the very structure can defeat the ultimate purpose because it is structured. Sometimes what happens when you're just talking to people and you just listen, you're taken into areas that were undreamt of. And that's sort of what I was hoping for, was to be able to establish a real rapport directly with staff and to just listen, you know, not to dictate, just to listen, as opposed to receiving some kind of formal report. And this report doesn't seem as though it's even going to address at the level that I was thinking of the sort of questions that I had. Now, I've said everything I want to say on this. I'm totally game to support whatever you all do. But I just wanted it to be known why it is that I reacted the way I did.
And I don't know, remember I have all my discussions at this point, but there was a discussion of a separate forum to do, I think, what you wanted to do. And that this particular one activity was not the right place to do it, but to have more of like this mixer meeting of the minds, free flowing conversation where I think we would have gotten that information. I think that was on our agenda to try to set up. And it also include maybe a foundation in it. Was that, okay. I get confused between this one and then the other celebration stuff. So that had come up and I don't know if it got lost in that thread or was in that thread at all, but I know that was not meant to be taken away 100%. It was just this one activity needed like an unbiased feedback from the staff. And then there was going to be like a separate get together, maybe with food or whatever. And then the meeting of the minds where what you want. So I think that was on the agenda to do, but I think that's separate from the long range planning. That's just like a,
Correct. There are,
if we want to.
if you look at the current plan that we have, there are multiple sections to the plan. So this particular focus group was just focusing on the future of the services that the library is going to provide and staff feedback. You know, we have talked about the culture of the library, the negativity between the board and the staff and the foundation. That is something that we can work into the long range plan. We want to improve all relationships in the library community. And we can totally write a plan for that. So this focus group, it was just changing the format of this particular section and the future of the services of the library from the staff point of view. So that's all that was changing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Right, sounds like some work to do for the committee.
Meeting, yeah.
All right, let's see. Finance and audit.
All right, start with finance. The finance committee has not met since last month, but we do have some outstanding issues or one big outstanding issue to bring up. If you recall, at last month's meeting, the finance committee had been presented by Tim Riley with some proposed adjustments to the current budget. And this was basically, it was no change to the bottom line number, the total revenue and expenses, but it was reallocating money from certain line items to better reflect the best current estimates of what our expenses were going to be in certain areas. And the committee had agreed to recommend that the board approve those, and we had said that Tim would send those proposed changes to all the members of the board so it could be considered at the next month's meeting. So I'm bringing it up now. Everyone should have received it. I don't know what it was, a couple of weeks ago. There was the revised budget with Tim's comment on it with those proposed changes. And so I'm bringing up now to see if we want to vote on approving those changes to those line items. And I don't know if there's any questions or comments or anything anyone wants to discuss on that or bring through.
Okay, so this is the copy that has the highlighted area that has the budget transfers.
It's a spreadsheet that has it lists proposed changes to certain lines. There's a column that says proposed change T Riley in parentheses.
Right.
That indicates which lines are being, there's a proposal to adjust them upwards or downwards. And again, the basic idea is just that we should, our budget should, as best we can, align with our actual expectations of how much we're going to be spending in those areas, that we're not having to, dealing with overrunning certain, budget lines or whatever later in the year as we go forward. So I don't know if there's any particular, if anyone had any comments or questions about this.
Have you reviewed this, Mike? You've reviewed this?
Yeah, and the committee did.
Yeah, bottom line doesn't change, it's just an internal reallocation.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the,
Kathy, I have a question if I could.
oh, sure.
This is sort of early in our budget year. What is the desire to reallocate these lines so soon? Many times I've seen it done, later in the course of the year as we get closer to the end of the budget, but that's just a basic question. Are we moving these lines too soon, or are we okay?
I propose it just to get us off on the right foot and to try to avoid questions like, why are we over budget in 3 months from now? We won't be, because we'll be closer to the expected realities. I'm just accustomed to trying to kick off the year with the most accurate budget you can provide. It's just a proposal as well. I mean, if everyone's comfortable waiting and going each month and talking about changes through the year, every month and every meeting, voting to go over budget on those line items, that's fine too.
Okay.
6 of
Thank
one,
you.
happening on the other.
Well, it sounds like the finance committee is recommending that we approve the changes to the line items all at once instead of doing it piecemeal. Is that correct?
I think, I don't want to speak for everyone, the committee, but I think the general consensus when we had the meeting last month, when we went over this, was that it was just that it made sense basically to, when we have new information that suggests that our estimates, are off in certain areas, that it makes sense to just, as well as we're able to align our budget to the actual, our actual expectations of what we're going to be expending. Again, there isn't a super time pressure on this as we're early in our budget year and we're not about to, run out of money on any of these budget items really soon, but just as a matter of, aligning the budget with what we're actually intending to spend in these areas made sense. So that was.
It's just a dynamic document. I mean, if something drastically changes.
Yes, we can always revisit it if it turns out, again in the future, but I guess the idea was just to try and, keep it keep it, accurate to our expectations rather than waiting until we run out of money in certain budget areas. So.
Did you want to have a motion then to?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the changes to the budget recommended by Tim Riley.
Is there a second?
Kathy, I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Barbara. Okay, is there any more discussion?
I'll just say that I conceptually I'm in support, but I missed reviewing those. It wasn't highlighted and I've been out of the loop for a little while, so I'm going to abstain, but conceptually I approve. I just want to make that clear.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor of approving of these budget transfers, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Aye. Other than one abstention, is anyone not in favor? All right, so with one abstention, it passes at 7:31. Okay. Was there anything else?
Yeah, one other, just on the finance committee, the committee had discussed, but we hadn't kind of done anything concrete on it, having much more regular committee meetings. And the suggestion that I'm going to put forward is that we make it a standing finance committee meeting every month immediately preceding the monthly board meeting. So 5:30 finance committee meeting before the 6 o'clock monthly board meeting, to just have a regular time when we're, talk with the treasurer and with Tim Riley and discuss finance before the monthly board meetings. So I haven't checked with the other members of the committee to see if that time works for everyone, but I'm proposing that as a regular monthly time for a standing finance committee meeting. So I'm just going to put that out there, and any other board members who aren't on the committee but would be interested in attending those meetings, just feedback if that works for people.
I think it's a good idea.
All right, that's the plan then. That's it for the finance committee. The audit committee has not met yet. I know that the audit process is ongoing. I don't remember when I had forwarded to the board a inquiry I had received from the outside auditors, just asking if we had any anything to disclose regarding any issues or incidents or concerns or things like that. I have not heard back from anyone on anything related to that. So I have let the auditors know that at least as of the present, I'm not aware of anything that needs to be disclosed pursuant to that. But I expect I'll be hearing from them as the fall goes on when they complete their audit process. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Now personnel, Marina is not here, just, I believe, and I know that, there are some ongoing negotiations which we would defer to executive session, but if there's anything to say about, personnel that doesn't involve, an executive session matter, maybe somebody would like to speak to them.
We've been involved in negotiations and personnel labor management together. And reserve our comments for executive session.
Okay. Anything on policy, Vanessa?
So the policy committee has not yet met. I've been a little bit out of circulation, pun intended. So I expect that the policy committee will be meeting, so no report today.
And I have no report on the COVID action. Fortunately, we have not had to have a meeting. But, yes, and I don't know if there's any foundation report in the absence of Marina.
I could just say very quickly that the golf tournament was a great success. I don't know much about golf, but it's apparently more expensive to play at private clubs than public clubs. And so that contributed to raising some of the money. The number of golfers also was about 50% higher than last year. And the number of sponsors in terms of dollars was $1,000 or $2,000 above last year. So it was a very successful event, a fun event, and I'll play golf again next year.
Great.
And I want to thank publicly the Waxman Burbank family and the Coons family, because basically they put together the golf tournament and probably raised, we'll get an accounting of it at the next foundation meeting, but I'm going to guess it was over 14,000. So
Thanks to everyone who was involved.
Did you play?
No.
Oh, I was sad to miss it. I'll be back out next year.
Natalie kind of played.
It counts. Let's go with it.
Yeah, there you go. I'll drink the cart.
HLS, any report, Corey?
I'm not exactly certain what the group would like to hear, but I can discuss that with you in email later. But I will just say 3 points. The UHLS Board of Trustees met yesterday, and 3 points of note. I believe the order has officially expired from the governor, so now we have to go back to full open meetings law compliance as of today. Is that correct? Does anyone know this? Yeah, the meeting was
There's a
actually
change to the.
Prior to the.
Okay.
yes, so Tim Burke sent an email and
Oh, sorry. Were you gonna say more?
Okay, please go ahead.
so there's a process by which the committee can, the board can pass a resolution that allows some virtual participation in what he put in quotation marks, extraordinary circumstances.
We already did that.
Oh, you did?
Did,
Great.
yeah.
In a special meeting.
Okay, good. So we're good then.
Okay.
So, my own personal feeling is, and Tim's feeling as he expressed it, is that the state did not define extraordinary circumstances, so we're sort of free to define it ourselves. So.
Okay. Well, you know much more than I do, even going to the meeting. The other two things that I think are worth mentioning is they're looking at the courier service to make sure it's still in the best place to get us the best deals possible for the whole system. And that the cost has increased because there is a term in the contract about fuel costs as well. And then there was a discussion of the trustees for UHLS becoming more involved with the other library systems. So there's more of a knowledge across the board members as a whole within the system. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Moving on to old business, I have scribbled in here that we're talking about the farmer's market contract extension. Could you tell us again what the new dates?
Sure. So the contract currently expires on October 2nd. He would like to hold markets on October 16th, 23rd, and 30th. And just as an FYI, he's also mentioned the possibility when we deal with a contract for next year of perhaps starting earlier than July 4th as well. So, but that's not for vote tonight by any means. I have copies of the contract if anyone wants one.
I move to extend the farmer's market contract to add operation on the dates of October 16th, 23rd, and 30th.
I'll second it.
All in favor of extending?
Oh, discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. Forgot about discussion.
It's okay.
So I'm just, were we charging them rent for the use of the space?
It's 200 a month, although the contract has a typo where it says 200 a week. So he already owes us 200 for October. So there would be no additional revenue as a result of the decision.
Okay. All right. That was my only question. I didn't remember, because I thought,
And in the email thread, his insurance covers him through the month.
Yeah,
Right.
it covers
Actually,
it
until
through actually
March.
March. Yeah.
Oh,
I recognize there's probably no hard numbers yet, but anecdotally, how did it impact when the library reopened on Sundays?
So I think it was only one Sunday so far, and there was concern in advance among the staff that there would be no place to park, but it turned out to be okay. The current hours of the farmer's market are 10 to 2, and the library opens at 1 on Sunday, so staff are reporting around 12:30. And my own visits to the farmer's market, plus conversation, anecdotal conversation, it seems to be busiest right when it opened and stays steady. And as it's getting toward maybe 1 o'clock, it's starting to thin out. So, so far it's not been a problem, but obviously we're gonna keep an eye on that. We do have a plan to put construction. We have a crew of anywhere from 8 to 12 people on a Sunday. So we have a plan to put construction cones in certain parking spots in the staff lot on Saturday night. Plan didn't go off as planned this past Saturday, but we will do it again. Actually, it did. I had conflicting information and I found out ultimately that it did work, but we'll do it for the 3 weeks, for every Sunday, the September Sundays and the October Sundays that the market is planned.
Any further discussion?
is this is the final version of the contract that we had?
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason I probably misremembering. I had thought that we had settled on something a little different. But I could be misremembering something.
So I'm just gonna check Mike's. Mike, I'm sorry, I had 2 people talking. So what did you think was, I mean, this is not the signed version.
Yeah, no, I could just be misremembering, because I remembered how there was an early version of the contract that had the $200 per each week language, and then we discussed it, and I thought there was a later version that said a total amount payable on the following date
You're right.
and had certain dates
You're
when
right.
it was payable.
Mm.
So I just wanted to clarify, because I didn't think it was phrased in terms of per month. It was, I think we decided it was just,
You're right,
it was a
yeah.
total amount for those weekends that it was, it's like. however
Also,
many
you
weekends.
note this is not the signed copy, so that lends, credence to what
Yeah.
you're saying. I had the idea to print it at about 5:20, so that's what I did, but I can find the,
Yeah, because my only question is, I don't know how much it matters. I know that at least my understanding was that we're supposed to, charge them, fair market value for use of the property. And the way that the contract, as I remembered it, was that we had said, okay, they're gonna get it for these, it was like, 10 weeks or however many weekends it was gonna be. And it's gonna be a total of X dollars payable on the following dates. And the last payment being that first week in October. And given that we had framed it that way, if we're going to extend it out for a few more weeks, my question was, should we just under the, if that's what we've established as fair market value, should we be expecting an additional payment for those additional weeks? Again, I don't know how much this matters, but, I just want to make sure we're, we aren't supposed to be kind of subsidizing a for-profit business on the library property. We're supposed to be, charging them a fair market value for the use of it.
and one interesting comment to make without knowing the answer to the comment is, there's a similarity between a cafe vendor that's for profit inside the building and a farmer's market outside the building. They're both on not-for-profit public spaces. And all I can say is that, in terms of when you combine the two issues, which I'm sorry if I'm creating mud by doing that, but basically we've checked with auditors, lawyers, other libraries, other not-for-profits, and everyone's like, it's just really not an issue of using, like if we, created a permanent gift shop that's always open and is run by Hallmark or something, that's apparently different than these kind of amenities that you offer on or in your property. Nobody appears to be an expert in it. I could certainly say that. Even, we asked Vanessa, and she did check with the folks at the SUNY system who are.
And it was a non-official
Mhm.
conversation, and I am not an
Okay.
expert on the topic.
Mhm.
Just trying to get an idea of what happens elsewhere.
Yeah, so in terms of a little bit of revenue that could come to the library, I guess my personal belief is the point of having the farmer's market is not to generate a little bit of extra revenue for us, but rather to have a community event that community enjoys. That is not to say that, you're the board, so if you guys want me to go back to them and.
I have heard nothing but good things about the farmer's market, and I think, if they want to extend, I'm very happy to do that. I just want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be, that we're, complying with our obligations and everything. But again, I don't think we need to, be squeezing them for an extra $200 or anything. I just want to make sure we're, doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's all.
I agree. I also think that this is all a learning experience for the
Okay.
library and such, and so better to just extend the days and get through this and then
Yep.
consult and figure out what we learned and do better next time.
And that's also a one-year contract.
Yes.
On the same philosophy.
Okay, well, there is a motion. So all in favor of extending the contract? The dates 10/16, 10/23, and 10/30. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the contract is extended as of 7:47 p.m. Okay, on to new business. Staff evaluations. I'm not sure, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure, I believe the reason it's on the agenda is because the library board, since I've been working here, has communicated to me on multiple occasions that not only would they like me to do a better job doing staff evaluations, but that they looked forward to reading them. With the arrival of Natalie, who has experience in 4 different public libraries, whereas I, 6, excuse me, whereas I have experience in 1 public library, it became clear that that's in fact not, sorry to use the term, but the best practice, that all staff who are evaluated by their supervisor. And I'm the supervisor of any staff that are in admin and IT, and department heads as well. And so we would like to discuss that, and hopefully, from my perspective, and I believe Natalie's, hopefully affirm together that the only evaluation that you folks should be involved with is mine, rather than department heads and performance. And I think that the underlying issue is you hire me to run a library, and then you get elected to oversee fiduciary stuff. And there's kind of a theme running through our discussions tonight, where that becomes part of the theme. And I don't want to even say that I know as much as Natalie. I think her experience is broad and deep. And this is also backed up by the folks at Upper Hudson. So, and then we checked with other directors of like large libraries in the system, and they said, yeah, that's the director's business to evaluate staff. It might be, I can't speak to the boards prior to January of 2014, but it might be that that has not been the practice of the board. As you all know, or those who are new may not know, I haven't done a very good job in conducting those evaluations. And therefore, when asked for them, I couldn't have produced them anyway. But we are, I've begun the process. I did one that I referred to earlier today, and you know, I understand the theory of it, and I'm looking forward to a new HR person coming to fill us in on what the current best practices for that are. And currently, we are holding that process for unionized staff at the request of the union through the labor management process until we get an HR person. But I think my objective, or our objective, is to see if you folks agree with that decision or that
So
perspective.
I'd like to comment. I actually don't know or can't remember when this specific request was handed to you. So I don't know if I was a part of that or not. I think I agree with the sentiment that you just expressed here. I would say that I do think that I would be interested in a board member, understanding that there is a solid staff evaluation process in place, and by that, have some visibility into the tool that you're using.
Sure.
Just for awareness, and then the fact that the evaluations were complete. A cherry on top could be some aggregate like data, just some general trends, or, you know, how it's informing your sort of management of the library, but seeing them explicitly and individually, I don't particularly have interest in that.
Did Marina find like a something that she referred to about that? I don't know about that. Was something that was mentioned. Marina, did she find a?
So the reason this.
I'm not using the right term.
Yeah, no, so the reason this came up, we were in a pre-meeting for negotiations. And it was one of the first meetings we did. We had a meeting with the union and our lawyer to go over the staff evaluations. And the union was very strong about not setting up this process that I had created with 2 other department heads, because they said that it was negotiable, that the form that we created was negotiable, and they didn't want us to do it until the HR person got here. And the reason that came up was because Tim had a performance evaluation, and I believe Kathy and Barbara asked him to see staff performance evaluations. Staff got wind of that and then went to the union. So that's why the process was delayed, and now we have to wait for the HR person to come about. So while I was explaining this in our pre-meeting, about why the union, rejected our performance evaluation, Narina, clearly pointed out like, hey, the board's not supposed to see staff performance evaluations, and she took board trustee training, which is why that's on the agenda too.
I think that's actually inaccurate. I mean, I don't recall asking to see specific performance evaluations. I think it was more of what Tim has just basically said, he has not always been completely diligent in doing those evaluations. I think that was more of the, how that came up. I do not recall ever asking to see anyone's specific evaluation. So if that's the rumor, I really don't think that's accurate.
So my recollection of the meeting
Kathy?
is.
Oh,
Go ahead,
Kathy,
Barbara.
I would definitely like to corroborate what you just said. When we had our meeting with Tim, we did point out the fact that a common critique over the years, with all his evaluations, and he said, I know what you're going to bring up, was the fact that he had not evaluated his staff, which is sort of one of the critical components of leadership as the director. And, he frankly admitted that. And that was the end of the discussion. We said, well, this year, could you put that as one of your goals, that you complete the evaluation of the staff that, are under your tutelage? And as he pointed out, as your administrative staff, your department heads. And he smiled at us and said he definitely would put that on his agenda. So that's probably why he brought it up here.
Well, and I must speak to that. I mean, it was a cordial meeting, certainly, and in all respects, a fair and accurate evaluation of me. But I distinctly remember questioning whether I should be sharing those with you and being advised by one of you, I don't remember which, you've both served on the Guilderland School Board, and being advised that I should go ask the school superintendent to whom I'm married. So I did. And she confirmed the perspective that I'm talking about, that boards are not to see evaluations of employees who do not report to them. And I would not have brought that up with my wife if I were not asked to. So there are apparently at least two perspectives of what went on in the meeting. But my recollection was that not only did you want them done, but you wanted proof that they were done in the sense of seeing them. Now, I may have misunderstood.
I think so, because the only time, any board that I've ever been on, including the school board, were to see any personnel records is if there are charges against that individual, be that criminal or civil, say if you are charging them with some kind of maltreatment of students or whatever, and that's the only time you would have access, and you'd only have access at that meeting, at the table. There would be no copies, etc. So I totally agree with Kathy. Nobody was asking to see individual evaluations. The only assertion made was that, you would tell us that you have done them and that, you've completed the process.
Well, then I apologize for misunderstanding one or both of you, and I'm good to go. And I have begun the process. The one thing I would say that for the board members' full knowledge of the situation is, while the CSEA unions have asked for a review of the process, the employees in question are not unionized. So I can go ahead and continue using the form because it's a common practice. So
It's not the board's job to look at individual assessments.
There's nothing we can do about it. We're not in charge of that.
You know, it's your job to do the evaluations. I think Vanessa's idea is a good one. Maybe, a periodic report in the aggregate, not picking out any particular people, but just an understanding as to how the process is going and anything that you can tell us that we should know and that you're
To me,
considering.
that would be.
But it's not our job. It's not our job.
And also the blank form that,
Yeah.
like you mentioned,
Yeah.
just the form,
form,
like
right.
not the filled in
Yeah.
form, just a form
Right, yeah.
would be helpful.
So I guess the message is do the evaluations and we don't need to see them.
My understanding from our discussion was that I was to do them and basically report to the board that I had done them and whether they were positive or not. Sort of a general idea of how the process went with each individual employee. And I don't think going to be doing more than like 2 per month, doing an initial round. And then after that, we're going to figure out if it should be done on anniversary date or, do them all in September or something along those lines.
And, it's good for staff as well, for you to do the evaluation and then discuss the evaluation with them, room for improvement. What's positive about them, what you see as needed to be done. And so that's always a good exercise, but it's not our job to look at those.
And for the record, Barbara is entirely correct that, this evaluation and several others in my 9 years here have called me to task for not regularly evaluating people, and I fully own that. I think basically there's two things running in my head. One is that there is current thinking on the evaluation of employees that may not include this typical evaluation form process. So we'll learn about that over time with our HR person. And the other is that frankly, I've always felt that there was more important things to do than evaluate, and that we have a difference of opinion about that, but I'm certainly willing to evaluate going forward. And I'm hoping that when I'm evaluated next year, my evaluation will not include that particular correct observation. So.
Just to note, if your evaluations will be accomplished and you will be evaluated accordingly.
And enough support for everything that Tim said. That is the policy. That is how boards should approach this. Even aggregate data gets into a little bit of a tricky situation, but we can talk about that in terms of finances if it has to do with raise, because that's what we are eligible to look at. But Tim is exactly correct with his assessment of how boards should function.
I mean, it would be such a rare occurrence that the board would have to get involved in a personnel issue.
Yeah, and that shouldn't even involve looking at evaluation.
Exactly. I think we're all focused to that.
Okay, and now we have board training to talk about. Sort of a segue right into board training. So I know that there's been something out there about potentially having
So
Tim Burke come in and advise the board on procedures and whatnot. I mean, whatever the best way to be the best board we can.
sure.
So
Couple of thoughts behind that concept. One is that a law goes into effect on January 1st, requiring all of you to have at least 2 hours of training per year. And it's a broadly defined training. It can literally be almost anything. So for example, your state required sexual harassment training each year, I believe, counts toward that. Related to that, many of you have gone to the core trustee training, and some have tried to go and not gone. The board has gone through a lot of change in the last 2 to 3 years, plus an international crisis, pandemic, plus a huge construction project. And it's quite often that I get situations like, if I can think calmly here, several times tonight, board members have said, well, that's not what I thought we were doing in a particular meeting. I think we need to go to the people that work with 29 library boards and know how they're supposed to run and spend a few hours that frankly, to me, I would exceed the 2-hour requirement. You know, so I don't want to get into a lot of individual issues, but this is a good board. There's a really good group of people here. I frankly think this might be the best board I've had in my close to 9 years. But in terms of optimum operations, I think that there's a difference between apparently library boards in New York and other boards on which you may have served. I think it would be good to spend that time. I personally go a little further with my recommendation. I'm not sure that it's necessary any longer, but a couple of years ago when there was a lot of contentiousness on the board and a split, I was recommending and continue to recommend what I would call a board retreat to, not just learn what the rules are, but to try to optimize the contributions you can make to the library, which I think this is a great group of people that has a lot to offer. So
So I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Okay.
One is seeing board training under new business. For me in particular, when I was a brand new board member, had asked and talked about this concept of a board retreat or brought it up. And so I just think it's on the onus of us as board members to keep that moving forward so that it actually happens. Because this is now probably, this is the second time that I've seen it in new business. It's not new business, it's old business, it's past due business. And then sort of also related to that, it's a little disconcerting that we all looked to Tim to initiate the discussion of this. I actually, again, think it is the onus of the board to really own the need for this, identify our places or points of learning and move it forward. And this is not a slight to you at all, Tim, but it's not your responsibility to train us. So
to jump in real quick, a good example is when we were searching for a treasurer and I kind of put my foot down and said, I'm not searching for a treasurer. You are.
Yeah.
And the people of the town are not paying me. They're not paying you either, let's be clear.
We signed up for that.
Yeah, but they're not paying me to find the treasurer.
Right.
That's not part of operating a library. It's the board that's required to have a treasurer. So the distinctions between what I do and my staff does and what you guys can, should, and shouldn't do, I think are not well known.
So I
I
would
just
just,
feel better, Vanessa. I did start an email thread somewhere and also this last month or so, and I think you technically gave your blessing to reach out to Tim Burke, and then I don't know what happened after that, but
so
it had kind of started.
there, I'm a little behind on my library, I
Yeah.
remember the circulation and back. But just one other comment and a recommendation, and I don't mean this to sound harsh at all, but I would look to our board president to sort of guide and ensure that this happens, and maybe you could create an ad hoc committee that could work with you to actually bring to fruition a board training. So that's just my recommendation.
Okay, well, it probably shouldn't have been new business because it has been around for a while. You're right. So I don't mind having the committee to do it because it's not really a one-person job. It's a
Yeah.
board. It's a board matter. You're absolutely right. So I guess I'm on it. So I asked for other volunteers to be on an ad hoc committee for.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we have to do it this second, but in the similar way that you sort of asked us for interest in serving on other committees, I think we just need you to establish the committee.
Well, is there any, since we're talking about it, is there anybody who's really interested in being on it?
I'll be on it.
Please.
I can do it. I would be willing to help. I cannot chair it.
So I'm going to push my luck and go a little further and just point out that it should not be me or Natalie who contacts Tim Burke to try to arrange,
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, we got it.
I just didn't know if you already had, so I didn't.
No,
wanna, like,
well, he knows that
duplicate
we would
that,
love
or-
to.
If Barbara has,
Kathy, I just have a question. Do you really need a committee? Basically, you're going to make a phone call to Tim Burke to see availability of dates and,
Well, I think we
Do
have
we
to
need a
decide what we
committee?
what we want to accomplish, I think.
but I also think, with all due respect, that this is not like a one and done. And therefore, I think we want a committee to be thinking about it as ongoing development.
Like in terms of tracking, like who, like check the box, like this person's done their 2
No,
hours.
no, I'm talking about the,
That again is your job.
No, that's what I'm saying for
I want
us
the committee to
like,
discuss.
committee
That's
that-
probably one aspect of it.
Okay.
But what I'm thinking is like any, like, you know, an annual board retreat.
Finding out.
Like all the other boards that I'm on, it's an ongoing sort of function. And I think we've approached it as compliance. And it hasn't worked well for us. So
You can work this into the long-range plan.
I am not going to the long range. Oh, there should be some crossover.
You know, like the board will be trained, continue training, that would be something in the long-range plan.
What is the requirement? I'm not very good with emails and figuring this out. I thought 2 hours of what?
Training.
I was getting cyber training, and frankly, I thought it was spam. So,
Any of the trainings that Upper Hudson offers will count. So like the core trustee training, the long-range plan training, construction grant training,
so it's sort of like
anything that NYLA
like
offers.
continuing legal education, you could just.
Yes.
do
Yeah.
whatever you
But
want.
I think it's a floor. I mean, I think I would hope that we're thinking about it as
Yeah.
a minimum.
The core
compliance.
trustee training is excellent, and you
Yes.
should participate in that if you haven't done it before, even as a refresher.
Maybe somebody should just call Tim. Get
That's
some of the
the
lay of the
action
land.
item
Yeah.
out of this, yeah.
And I think the formation of a committee, just so I'm clear, is for ongoing training as a board. Just,
My recommendation would be board training and development. I mean, do we need any other information than that? And to
Planning a
establish?
retreat, planning a retreat.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can, I mean, I don't know that in the formation of the committee, do you typically outline all of their activities at the beginning? Can't they?
no, I mean, I just, in general, I think scheduling a retreat would be the priority.
I would say developing a retreat. I don't think you just schedule it.
It
well,
sounds as though we're conflating training with the retreat. And I could imagine them being separate and distinct. That is that we have training, we undergo training, but the retreat would be something that is agenda-free potentially. And maybe invite some staff to join us and to really.
I think that's a different thing, and that's why I want to avoid us trying to hash it out here. If we're
Yeah.
going to make it a committee, let the committee do some work and bring back a recommendation or proposal to the board. Typically, you can define retreat a lot of different ways. I was just using it as a meeting or a series of meetings or a longer than usual meeting where some activities occur to help support the training and development of our board.
So we're not going to the Poconos.
It's not in the budget.
Yeah. I think you need an agenda for a retreat with some room for free discussion.
Who's gonna go to Rotterdam?
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think an agenda is good. Okay, all right,
It's our travel budget.
I'll figure out this,
Aided by Mel.
this committee and.
We're gonna do a lock-in in the library.
Right.
So I would love to make one more constructive and I believe positive comment, which is that when Andy Genovese was on the Long Range Planning Committee, the committee in one of our meetings came down to this idea that for our board, our staff, and our foundation, the mission statement, if you will, is perhaps the vehicle for this, but not everyone who's involved with this library has the same why. Why are we involved with this library? And a good goal for the long-range planning process, as well as for the board development and for staff development, is getting the same why, flying the same flag. So I hope that we can do that at some point, that we can, you know, get the same why. But you can't get it unless you have some introspective time and some, as I think Ted's pointing out, some, when you guys do that board training, I think you've got to push UHLS, because as much as I agree with the idea that you aren't supposed to, for example, look at my evaluations, the concept that there is to be no communication between the board and the staff seems counterintuitive and quite difficult to me, especially if you think of smaller communities. This isn't a huge town, but think of Bern, for example. Like, the board and the staff are probably in constant communication in a small place like that. And I don't think it's meant to be a, you know, you may not talk to my staff member. I'm not trying to project that, but there must be some safe and allowable way to have staff and board share ideas and collaborate, you know. I don't know what it is. And that's why I think the board trainings that I've been involved with at Guilderland have all included the director. You can ask Tim if that's a good idea or not, you know. But the past boards, like I learned from hiring Natalie in terms of this evaluations issue, that it would have been great if I approached all my boards for the last 8 years. Every time they asked me something, I would say, well, okay, let me check and see if that's the right way to proceed. And I didn't. So I might from here on out. But anyway.
Do we need to vote on creating ad hoc committee? Is that what happened last time? I don't know.
I just know that the president creates them. I don't know anything else beyond that.
I don't know if we wanted to vote to create an ad hoc committee. I mean, we do vote on committees, so,
Vaguely remember that. That's why I wanted to ask if we
I
might as well
just-
just do it now.
I
since
have-
we're starting
I have
this.
myself, you, Elise, and Corey.
No.
Joanne.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to react to that way.
I was Joanne though. I just want to give her the opportunity.
Right next to you, so. All right,
That
so
was maybe my favorite moment of the whole meeting.
got the wrong volunteer. All right, so we have a 3-person committee.
Do you
Oh,
get me?
Vanessa.
Oh, and you want to be on the committee too?
It feels only right after all of my feedback.
I have to give you guys credit for all the laughter and reality related to like some big difficult issues, you know.
Okay. So the ad hoc committee for, you had a good phrase for it, board.
For training and development or
Board-
learning and development.
Board training and development, ad hoc committee consisting of Kathy, Alish, Joanne, and Vanessa. Is there a motion
Now,
to
Kathy,
establish?
is that synonymous with the retreat? If there's some
Forget the word
overlap-
retreat. Like, I don't think the committee's decided what the activities will be just
Okay,
yet.
but I mean, I just want to make sure when you ask me to vote, what it is I'm voting for. And if what I'm voting for is a training session called a retreat, that's something very different than what I thought.
You're voting on the creation of the.
Yeah, we're just voting
All
on the
we're voting for is
committee
to
creation.
create a 4-person ad hoc committee to consider what type of training and development
Opportunities
opportunities for the.
the board should pursue.
So is the notion of a retreat separate and distinct from that?
It's a possibility.
It may be a subset of.
We
what
don't
they
know
look
yet.
at.
I think that would fall under board training and development, so so this committee, if they wanted to pursue a retreat, that would be within their kind of
Right.
ambit to present that to the board and say, we recommend we have this retreat.
It would just be
But I-
recommendation. We.
Okay, so let me
No,
But
just-
I
committees
think
can actually-
I just want to make this, I think we have to be careful. The retreat is not just like, the word retreat doesn't refer to a concrete, discrete event. You all could possibly pursue a retreat format for your long-range planning. right? Like, it's like the name for a type of meeting. It isn't like, there's not only one version, and it doesn't just belong to this committee. COVID Action Committee could have a retreat, good gracious, I don't know why that's so I just want to make that clear. I'm not proposing, I kind of regret saying the word retreat, but I just meant that this committee should explore multiple avenues of providing this board opportunity for learning, training, development, whether it be at a retreat, a meeting, in a bounce house. I mean, I don't know. We haven't decided.
The only thing you're obligated to do is the 2 hours because of that long.
But that's a separate requirement that this committee will
I
consider.
just want to slip something in here, just, this is from personal viewpoint, but sometimes there's tension or conflict between compliance and creativity. That is, we have agendas every time we meet. And it's pretty well spelled out, and there's an orthodoxy to what we do. We have new members here that may have new ideas, fresh ideas. We have a staff that we really don't know. There are tensions within the staff that have never come up in meetings here that I've been to. I mean, they've been referenced, but never addressed head on. There are concerns that the staff have shared with me that have never even come up here. And it sometimes it feels a little bit like the elephant in the room. Sometimes it feels like there's a lot happening that we don't talk about as a board. And you know, and the big thing, the big ideas, taking advantage of new members and new ways of looking at things is, I think, not going to be advanced exclusively by training or even principally by training. And I hope that at some point, we will be driven for at least some window of time, not by a specific agenda, but by actually thinking outside the box about what is it we can do as a board? What questions should we be asking? You know, because a lot of times I think we are constrained by a kind of orthodoxy of compliance and training and agendas. And I think we potentially miss opportunities that are really important. And so I just want to put that in there because to me, that's really important. Those things that have not yet come up. I just want to put that out there.
I think in advance of the meeting, you can always suggest we put something on the agenda, I guess the A word, right? To have those discussions. If you do get a particular piece of feedback you want to discuss with the board, just let us know in advance because Jenna usually sends something out to us saying like, does this agenda look okay? And then we put it on here for discussion.
But
it's not
are
saying
there
that you
things
couldn't.
in your mind, you're familiar with this library more so than I am.
Well, I'm new too, technically.
I'm sorry, what?
We got voted in at the same time.
Well, but I mean, I think you have a greater familiarity than I, and certainly other members around the table. And I think that there are things that don't come up that matter to staff, to the library itself, to the community and its relationship to the library. And I'm just a little concerned, and I'm new, and I haven't had a chance to look over the horizon here. I really am new, but I'm hoping that some of these other areas that I think are important will surface because they're not listed on agendas, and we spend 3 or 4 hours dealing with things that have to be dealt with. I'm not minimizing their importance, but I do fear that there are things out on the margin that aren't coming up that might be at least as important as the things on the agenda. And I say that in part from my private discussions with members of the staff here. I mean, the things that have been expressed to me have not been voiced around this table yet.
Well, and you might be the only one who knows that,
So-
you know what I mean?
Well, I doubt that.
So respectfully, though, and I think you brought up a good point earlier about sort of the process. I would say, and others correct me if I'm wrong, this board ad hoc, board training development ad hoc committee is a really good example of that. That wasn't a committee that existed before tonight. It showed up under new business today for us to discuss. And as a board, we talked about it and made a recommendation, and hopefully we're on our way to adopting this new committee structure because the reason the agenda is like this is that this is a business meeting, right? And so I think some of what you're talking about probably needs to happen in a different venue. Otherwise, we will go back to having 6-hour business meetings. And so I don't disagree with you. I'd love to have some of those conversations, but like make a recommendation or, you know, bring it up for new business so we can discuss and identify as a board the best venue and time and place for those broader discussions to happen and be developed. One of the things I hope we cover in board training and development is how to resist the irresistible urge to conduct committee work during a business meeting, because that's actually not ideal. So I like some of the ideas that you're talking about. One of the things I was motivated about to join the board were to explore some of those things. I'm relatively new. You might be under the wrong impression about the tenure of the board. It's a really young board and most of us on here are pretty new. So I don't know how it all works out yet. But I would encourage you to raise new business topics with the president and vice president so it can go through the process. And maybe there's a different committee. Maybe there's another avenue by which we can explore that work as a team.
For example, setting the board agenda for each meeting is something that's been done several different ways in my 8.5 years here. So maybe there is a best practice for how to set a board agenda. My understanding, I think Vanessa said it, but I think any board member can contact Kathy or Alicia.
I think what happens is that Jenna sends out the agenda 1 week before the board meeting, so it would have been last Thursday. So for a few days before that, the agenda's in draft form. So if you contact me or Alicia, we could certainly pass that along. Any suggestions you might have for agenda items. It has to be prior to the Thursday before the meeting, because that's when the agenda goes out. Okay, so did we have a motion yet? I don't think we had a motion yet to establish this new ad hoc committee.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, and Marcia. All right, any more discussion? We had quite a lot. More discussion? All in favor of establishing this committee consisting of myself, Alicia, Joanne, and Vanessa, please say aye.
Did we say who's chairing the committee?
I think maybe Joe.
On it. She said or she would share it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because we're supposed to, under the bylaws, we have to
Yeah,
say
what I
who's chairing, so.
So.
You were chairing it, correct?
I'm chairing, okay.
Oh, never, that was a question, not a statement. I'm sorry.
You have a lot of support.
So
I
let's do-
cannot chair it.
Okay, I will chair. I will chair. All right, all in favor?
Aye. Barbara's dropped off. Oh, no, she's back.
Anyone opposed?
Are you voting in favor?
I'm sorry, yes.
Anyone opposed? All right, so the,
Barbara just hopped back on. I don't know if it matters, but we were voting on the
ad hoc committee.
ad hoc committee. Are you, yes, yay or nay?
Okay, she's yay. All right,
All right.
so passes unanimously. The new committee chaired by me. And we will have a meeting soon. Passes at 8:26 p.m. Okay, now, is there any public input?
All's quiet on the public input
Okay.
front.
Thank goodness.
We have need of an executive session. I'm not sure, is there a separate room for those on the?
There currently is not a separate link. Sean had texted me earlier today and says that he's able to stop the streaming so that we can go into executive session.
Okay.
The only concern with that is that technically you're supposed to stream the back end of executive session as well. So I don't know how we would do that, although I'm sure you could create a separate.
Typically, we have not streamed, our votes.
Okay,
It's just that they are, noted for the minutes.
Right,
They go into the minutes and then public minutes have all of the, votes, so.
so if you're comfortable, I'm comfortable, we can just stop the streaming and then you keep any staff you want.
I think the problem was, also the recording, that
Oh,
we
right,
don't
right.
want, recording.
Of the executive
Executive session.
What we
Can I move that we enter executive session so it doesn't, or do we need to wait until this discussion of the recording is done?
I think we need to figure this out.
I don't think I can, the recording is set up ahead of time for the WebEx. I can stop the streaming right now, but we'd have to restart the meeting.
You have to restart the meeting.
Exactly.
Restart the WebEx.
That was an issue
Yep.
previously. I support.
So we can set up a new link without.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we do is just basically send it shortly into Barbara.
Correct.
Yeah.
You'll get a new link in about a minute.
Thank you for the treats.
Yeah, you're the treat person.
Pass them down here. I haven't had any.
Joy.
Oh, yeah,
I
we
just-
need
I
to move
put
to
my
executive
phone.
session. We didn't do that. I move that we adjourn to executive session. It's 8:28.
You have to say the purposes of.
Purpose of contract negotiation for particular administrative employee and status of negotiations with employee bargaining units.